Hey guys, here I am with another video. I'm in a place called the Kowloon City Wall Park, and it's called that because this place used to be its own city within Hong Kong. There used to be 30,000 people who lived in around the spot in a bunch of condensed buildings that were all very close together. So 30,000, that's as many as the people who live in Upper Hutt, my hometown, all living in, I don't know the exact size of this place, but it's very small. I'll show you a model of it now that they have just over this way. This place is so beautiful now. It's crazy to think that it used to be a very densely populated kind of slum, and now it's just this beautiful park. I'll kind of walk through here a bit so you can see more. But they kind of turned it into a traditional Chinese garden. I mean, look at this, it's quite amazing. It's awesome, in fact. Yeah. Here are the remaining foundations of the walled city. So only a tiny bit left. Got like some info guide here. Said they dug this up after demolishing it, and they didn't plan to preserve any of the building. So this is kind of here by accident, but they decided to keep it because it would be cool. And it was demolished in 1994, cleared out in 1992. So it was demolished in my birth year. And here is a bronze model of what the city used to look like. So 30,000 people all living in this dense block of buildings. This is exactly what it looked like because they surveyed it and then got someone to recreate it. And that's what it may have looked like on the inside. But this isn't actually the topic of the video today. I'm going to be talking about something else. So let's go to the next topic. Alright, today's topic is going to be, is Hong Kong and China the same country or the same place? I get a lot of people saying to me, oh, how's China going? Or, why can you use Facebook? I thought that was blocked in China. Or, you shouldn't be being so political over there in China, Cameron, because you might get sent to the gulag or something. Well, Hong Kong and China aren't really the same place. I mean, China does technically own Hong Kong, but they're different for a lot of reasons, and I'll go through these now. But first, check this out. So beautiful. Now, first of all, I'll go through like the history of Hong Kong. As most people know, Hong Kong used to be a British territory or colony. In 1997, though, they gave it back to China. For 150 years, though, before 1997, Hong Kong was actually British-run, British-owned. The population was still mostly Chinese, of course, but the laws, everything like that, were British, and it was obviously a completely different country and place to China for 150 years. First question you may be thinking, or I want to go through. Oh man, sorry about this light change. There we go. Hopefully it won't change now. Why did Britain get to control a part of China for so long? How did they get that? If you guessed that they invaded it and took it, you're right. Let's go through what exactly happened. Wow, check this out. I found a cool place to film. I'm up on like some rocks. But yeah, the reason Britain took Hong Kong was Back in the Qing Dynasty days, everyone used to want to trade with China. They had like silk and jade and what else? Porcelain, gunpowder, so many commodities that Europe wanted to buy, but they wouldn't really accept many British or European goods in return, mainly because they thought they weren't that valuable. So the British, the devils they were, decided to bring in something they know would sell well, heroin. Well, not heroin back then, it was still opium, a more crude form. But yeah, they basically showed opium to China, even though they probably had come across it before, but not in such quantities. And, you know, the demand for heroin is always going to be quite high, so they managed to trade for these things like silk, porcelain, gunpowder, everything else, by trading it for opium. And the Qin dynasty weren't happy about this at all, so they kicked the British out of the trading port of Guangzhou, and the British weren't allowed to trade there anymore. But, you know, they don't take no for an answer. The old British Empire back in the day. So they invaded Hong Kong Island, where I live. It's a little island. I'm in Kowloon at the moment, but it's on the other side of the harbour. And did all their opium trading and a curing of Chinese goods through Hong Kong Island. And then eventually they also invaded Kowloon, where I am now. And then after that, the Qin dynasty bureaucrats gave them a 100-year lease on the new territories, which is the mountains and forests a few hundred meters that way. And yeah, that's how the British acquired Hong Kong and managed to keep it for 150 years. Then you're probably wondering though, if the British already had taken control of Hong Kong and held it for so long, why would they just give it back? Well, remember how I mentioned they had a 100-year lease on the new territories. Eventually, that sort of started coming up to the deadline, which was actually in 1997. And the leader of China at the time, I've forgotten his name, said to Margaret Thatcher in the 80s, the deadline's coming up on that treaty the old Chinese government signed. Could you maybe give us back Hong Kong? And Britain by then was not a world superpower anymore. They barely won a war to Argentina in the Falklands. So they were kind of forced to agree with the leaders of China. And also they had threats to like cut off the water supply to Hong Kong, things like that, because obviously they're not fully self-sufficient here. They have to rely on the mainland for things. So yeah, they agreed to give it back in 1997, but with 50 years of keeping the British law and its own currency and a high degree of autonomy from the mainland.
British Guard of Honor, present up!
And then so you come back to the question, is Hong Kong really part of China? By law and officially, you know, according to the United Nations general consensus, sure. But because of that agreement to maintain 50 years of high autonomy and keep British law, essentially it is run like a different country. I'll go through some other points on how they are so different. So yeah, because of that 50-year agreement and to keep the British law, Hong Kong sort of is run on the same laws that it was when Britain still controlled it. And it's going to be like that until 2047. They also have their own currency, the Hong Kong dollar. They have their own government with they have a chief executive, not a prime minister. And they have the same style of British courts here. Everything is sort of run the same way as it was under England, but now it's owned by China. Also, in terms of the internet, you can access anything here. It's not under the Great Firewall like in the mainland. Hong Kong is essentially a different country. You also have to go through customs to get from the mainland China to Hong Kong and vice versa. Even mainland citizens have to get a passport to come here. But then the question is, when we get to 2047, what's going to happen? I'm not really sure. They could just integrate fully with the mainland, or they could maybe sort of extend the agreement, but I think the former is more likely. You sort of see integration happening very quickly already, and it's only been 20 years, so yeah, we'll see what happens. Another point to add is that a lot of people don't realize this, but also the languages between Hong Kong and the mainland are different. In the mainland they speak Putonghua, or Mandarin as we'd call it in the West, but here they speak Guangdonghua, which is Cantonese. So even the languages are quite, well, very different. They're not that similar at all. They also write in traditional Chinese here, not simplified. Simplified Chinese was developed by Chairman Mao back in the day, so that all of the Chinese people had an easier time at learning Chinese, because obviously there's 3,000 plus characters. It's quite difficult to learn. I think that's why they did that. I'm not sure. Don't quote me. But yeah, even the languages are very different, which again adds to a feeling of them being two separate places. If you're walking around Hong Kong though, you will see, and I'll bring up a video now, there is the Hong Kong flag, which is like a little red square with a flower in it, and then right next to that will be a big version of the Chinese flag. It's a lot bigger than the Hong Kong one. And I think this is kind of from the British days. They probably used to have the British flag next to the old Hong Kong flag, but you're always kind of reminded that legally this is China, but in terms of what it feels like like a different place. So I think that'll be the consensus, and the final answer, yes, Hong Kong is China, but in terms of being here and what it feels like a separate place, and the laws are completely different. So it's kind of ambiguous. I guess I have not succeeded in putting down the people who say I do live in China. Legally, yes, you're right, but everything is different here. Oh well, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you for watching. Sorry it was a bit like cut up and stuff like that. It's hard to talk constantly for 5 or 10 minutes, especially when there's heaps of people walking around. It's awkward talking to yourself or to your phone. But yeah, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and let me know if I got any facts wrong in the comments.